My name is Maria Dalton. I'm 27 years old this year, and I've been married to Kevin for 5 years. We have a beautiful little boy named Martin, who just turned 4. Life wasn't always easy, but I tried to make it work, for Martin, for our family. After getting married, I worked full-time for a while, but eventually I switched to part-time so I could be there more for Martin. I still work at the same company. Kevin is 3 years older than me, he's 30 now. When we were dating, Kevin was so passionate and affectionate. He pursued me like I was the most important thing in the world. But after we got married, things changed. He became more controlling and distant. And then there was his sister, Jane. Jane is 10 years younger than Kevin, just 20 now, and he treats her like a little princess. I didn't think much of their closeness at first. Before our marriage, Jane would visit often, and I thought it was sweet. But after I became Kevin's wife, something shifted. Jane started showing up at our home without calling, sometimes at odd hours. She never brought anything, no snacks, no small gift, not even a polite thank you. And worse, she expected to be served like a guest in a hotel. She wouldn't even look at me. She'd just say, "Brother, I'm here again," and take over the living room like it was her own space. Kevin never said anything to her. Instead, he scolded me, loudly, in front of her, for not being thoughtful enough to prepare extra food. So I'd quietly make an extra plate for Jane, while they laughed on the couch, leaving a mess behind. Neither of them would clean up. They rarely even spoke to Martin, treating both of us like we were just in the way. One evening, I was about to give Martin his bath when Kevin suddenly shouted from the living room. Jane had decided she wanted cake, and Kevin wanted me to go out and buy it for her. It was already late, but Jane insisted. Kevin got angry, blaming me for not doing it sooner. So I wrapped up Martin, who was still damp from the bath, and we went out to find a cake. While I was getting our things, I overheard them talking. They were mocking me, saying I wasn't thoughtful, wondering why Kevin had even married me. My heart sank, but I kept it together for Martin, who was excited about getting cake. He said he wanted one with lots of fruit, so we found 2 cakes, one Jane wanted, and one for Martin, and came home just before the shop closed. Back home, I gave Jane her cake and set Martin's fruit cake on the table, but then Jane pointed at Martin's cake and said she wanted that one instead. Kevin didn't hesitate. He moved Martin's cake over to Jane without even asking. Martin's eyes filled with tears, but Kevin ignored him. He said, "I paid for it, I get to choose what he eats." That was the moment I broke. I told Kevin he was being unfair. Instead of listening, he threatened divorce. Martin, clutching my hand, said softly, "Mom, I like strawberry cake too. It's delicious." He said it with a smile, trying to comfort me even though it was his cake that was taken. I gently picked up the cake plate before Jane could touch it and took Martin into the next room. He ate quietly, enjoying every bite. I wanted to say something to Kevin, to shout, but I stayed quiet for Martin's sake. That night, we bathed together and snuggled into Martin's little bed. It was cramped, but warm. I held him close and listened to his breathing until I fell asleep. The next morning, Jane was gone. I got up to make breakfast when I heard Martin crying. I rushed to his room and found his little piggy bank shattered on the floor. It was a gift from my dad, and Martin had been carefully saving coins for months. All the money was gone. When I asked Kevin, he casually said, "Jane needed money, so she took it," just like that, no remorse. Martin was sobbing in my arms, his whole body shaking. He always said goodnight to that piggy bank. That's when I started crying too. I couldn't hold it in. I finally confronted Kevin, something I usually avoided in front of Martin, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. Kevin didn't say a word. He just walked into the bedroom and came back holding something. It was a stack of divorce papers. Without warning, he shoved them at me, said nothing, and left the house with a slam of the door. Martin had never cried like this before. I could tell he was breaking, too, so I knelt down and said, "Do you want to skip daycare today?" He looked up, still crying, and gave me the biggest yes, with a small, brave smile. We spent the whole day together. Martin picked a picture book and sat on my lap. He looked up at me and said, "Mama was the teacher today, right? She looked like an angel." I held back tears, hugging him tightly. I called work and asked for a day off. Thankfully, they understood. We spent the morning in the park, playing hide and seek, jumping in the sandbox, sliding down the slide again and again. When we came home, Martin looked sleepy. Usually, he naps alone, But that day he curled up on my lap like he used to when he was a baby. I was going to do some chores, but instead, I just sat there, watching him sleep, letting his peaceful face heal my tired heart. Then I heard the front door open. It wasn't Kevin's usual time to come home. I panicked. I scooped Martin into my arms and quietly hid in the bedroom closet. My heart was pounding. It was Jane. She walked through the house, muttering angrily. She was searching for something, opening drawers, pacing, frustrated. Then she made a call. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard her mention Kevin and say something about not finding what they were looking for. Eventually, she locked the door and left. I gently laid Martin down and sat beside him, my mind racing. What were they trying to find? My savings? My valuables? Was Kevin letting her into our home while I was away? That night, I packed a small bag. I took Martin's essentials and held his little hand. We walked to the station and took the train to my parents' house, just 2 stops away. They didn't ask questions. They saw my face and welcomed us in. When I finally told them everything, about the piggy bank, the cake, Jane's visits, the divorce papers, they were heartbroken. My mother gently said, "She was probably looking for your things, dear, money, maybe cards." I nodded, realizing how blind I'd been. And for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Looking back on everything, it's hard to believe how far I've come. Before I became a full-time mom, I was the CEO of a successful company that specialized in handmade goods. I poured my heart into that business and built it from the ground up. But after marrying Kevin and giving birth to our son Martin, I decided to step back and focus more on raising my child. I handed over the daily operations to close friends I trusted, though I still worked part-time and stayed in touch with the company from home. Kevin didn't know I was still the CEO. I kept that part of my life private. From the beginning, I sensed Kevin wasn't great with money. He spent whatever he earned and didn't seem to understand the importance of saving. That's why I never shared much about my financial situation. I told him I received some support from my company, but I didn't go into detail. Deep down, I knew if he found out about my savings or position, he might take advantage of it. Kevin gave me only $200 each month for groceries and wanted me to quit my job and become a full-time housewife. But $200 was far from enough, especially with a growing child. I refused to quit and insisted on working part-time. In return, Kevin made me sign a post-marital property waiver through a lawyer, trying to protect himself in case of a divorce. Since Martin was born, I've been covering most of his expenses, nursery fees, clothes, everything, with my own money. I never asked Kevin for help beyond the small grocery allowance, which only reinforced his belief that I had secret savings. I was careful with my finances. I had a separate account just for Martin, where a portion of my salary was deposited every month. I always kept my important cards and cash on me, never left them lying around. But then things started to feel unsafe. I found out Kevin had hidden divorce papers. It felt like he'd been waiting for the right moment to push me out, maybe when he thought he could take something from me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he and Jane were after my money. Jane, his younger sister, was only 20 and had a habit of showing up unannounced, acting entitled to everything. I started to wonder if she'd been coming into the house when I wasn't there, with Kevin's approval. My father, who has always been practical and protective, advised me to keep my valuables at their place. So I did. I stored my important documents, savings cards, and anything of value in their home safe. Then came the moment that broke my heart. Martin's piggy bank, a gift from my father, was found smashed. His savings were gone. Martin cried as if someone had crushed his little dreams. He always said goodnight to that piggy bank. When I asked Kevin, he casually said Jane needed money and took it, just like that. Seeing Martin so devastated pushed me over the edge. I couldn't hold in my feelings anymore. I confronted Kevin right there in front of Martin, something I'd never done before, and instead of apologizing, he brought out the divorce papers and handed them to me with a cold expression. Martin, my sweet boy who always tried to be strong, started crying again. I couldn't take it. I told him we were skipping daycare that day and took the day off work. We spent that day together, just the two of us. We went to the park, played on the slides and in the sandbox, laughed, and had lunch together. For the first time in a long while, I saw his eyes light up again. Later that night, while he napped on my lap, I felt peaceful, but that peace was short-lived. The front door creaked open, and it wasn't Kevin, it was Jane. I quickly grabbed Martin and hid in the closet. I heard her talking on the phone, frustrated that she couldn't find whatever it was she was looking for. She mentioned Kevin's name. Once she left, I packed a bag and took Martin to my parents' house. Thankfully, they lived just 2 train stops away. My parents welcomed us without asking too many questions. They could see something was wrong. I told them everything, and my mom quietly said, "She was probably looking for your money or cards." The next day, we took action. My father called a lawyer he trusted, someone I'd known since I was young. With their help, I decided to record Kevin's conversation to understand his real intentions. That evening, while I cooked dinner, I turned on my phone's recorder and placed it face down on the counter. When Kevin arrived, his first question was about my cash cards. I pretended not to understand, and he kept dodging my questions, trying to play it off. Eventually, he exploded, demanding I hand over all my part-time earnings, for Jane. That was it. I told him no, that money was for Martin. He didn't care. He said I lived off his money and didn't need to save. He then shoved the signed divorce papers toward me again. I stopped cooking, picked up the papers, held Martin's hand, and walked to the door. As I opened it, Kevin shouted, "Don't ever come back," and I replied calmly, "I won't return to a house where strangers come and go as they please." Back at my parents' home, I showed them the recording and the divorce documents. I told them I didn't love Kevin anymore, but I was worried about Martin. They told me to do what I felt was best. Later that night, Martin told my mom he was hungry. She made him his favorite, hamburgers. As he ate, I cried quietly, overwhelmed with emotion. My mother smiled at Martin and said he and I could come visit anytime. Martin beamed, saying Grandma's burgers were the best and he wanted to eat them every day. I told him it was because the burgers were full of love. He giggled, took a big bite, and offered some to me. I cried again, and my dad reassured Martin, saying, "Mama's crying happy tears." That night, I made my decision. I would go through with the divorce. The next day, we finalized everything with the lawyer. Kevin had tried to manipulate the situation because Jane was in deep debt from gambling and shopping. He'd even acted as her guarantor. They had planned to use my savings to cover it. But it was too late. The divorce papers were filed. Kevin cried when he found out it was official. He signed a pledge to pay $340 a month for Martin. In a final phone call, he apologized, admitted to using me, and said he had complicated feelings toward Jane. I didn't waver. I told him goodbye, and he wished me happiness before hanging up. Now, Martin and I live peacefully at my parents' house. I've returned to being CEO and have slowly rebuilt my life. Kevin and Jane eventually confessed everything to their parents and were disowned. It's sad, but I feel free now. I'm surrounded by love and support, and every time I see Martin smiling, I know I made the right choice.